From courtside the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 580. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, DV3 in the forum, and DV3G and DV384 on X. Derek, lots of fun stuff to talk about again this week, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here as always. I'm getting my fill, Andrew, of basketball tonight. I just had a local league game, came home, took a shower, get to jump on the podcast with you and, record this show, which I look forward to every week. And, earlier today I was playing some NBA 2K25 and some NBA 2K14. So just a full day of hoops and you can't go wrong there.
Oh, for sure. Also exciting news with the NBA coming back to NBC, of course. Michael Jordan, the GOAT himself, is going to be a special correspondent. Is going to be part of the broadcasts.
I love it, but at the same time, I can just only imagine the stupid questions he's going to be asked on air. And everything that he says is going to be put under a microscope, and topics are going to be brought up that are not even related to what's going on in the current NBA. And I'm not looking forward to that aspect. I'm not looking forward to the drama that people are going to create around this, as I'm sure you're not either.
True. But at the same time, I kind of look forward to Petty Jordan.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of us are looking forward to that. So, Andrew, this entire episode is actually centered around a community question that was asked by Thundershack, who is an excellent modder in the community. He's been doing rosters for a long time, specifically on NBA 2K20, and people love those rosters. He creates retro single seasons and other content around it, and he's given people great experiences with that game that they never would have had if he hadn't jumped on his PC and modded that game. So we appreciate him for that. But his community question, Andrew, was historically, what are people's favorite team to watch from their favorite franchise, their favorite team to watch that's not from their favorite franchise, and their favorite bad team to watch? And he gives an example, the 0-2 Clippers. And so we're going to answer these first, and then we're going to get to the community's responses. I will go first and then throw it over to you. So my favorite team from my favorite franchise. So this was tough, Andrew, because I was very fond of the Paul Pierce, Antoine Walker Celtics of the early 2000s, the Eastern Conference Finals team, even the teams in the mid 2000s before the big three teamed up with, KG, Ray Allen, and Pierce, and then obviously Rondo was there. But, even like the Paul Pierce, Wally Zerbiak Celtics with Gerald Green on the bench and whatnot. And then, there was the Dominique Wilkins season in 94-95 where we picked up Neek as a free agent. And it was, Dominique Wilkins and Dino Raja and David Wesley. And I'm really fond of that team, and D Brown. And then, even like the bad Celtics, teams that weren't making the playoffs, this 96-97 team, the won 15 games. And it was, Dino Raja and Rick Fox and, D Brown, and they were flooded with injuries. And, that team even, I have a lot of fond memories of. But, I had to go with the 90-91 Celtics, because it's the first year that I can remember actually sitting in front of my TV watching NBA games. It's the year the Celtics won 56 games, and due to the way they performed during the season, they were actually considered potential title contenders. Bird was injured for part of the season, but still played 60 games. McHale and Parrish were both still putting up numbers, including Parrish averaging a double-double and McHale averaging 18.4 points per game. And the big three were all all-stars in that season. D Brown, of course, won the slam dunk contest, beating Sean Kemp in the finals. This is the time I asked everybody in my family to call me D, and that is stuck to this day. Reggie Lewis averaged 18.7, Andrew, that season, and was really starting to come into his own. He was an all-star the following season. Much of the basketball world thought that the Celtics had a legitimate chance due to having Bird, McHale, Parrish, and Lewis. Brian Shaw, who was not my favorite, was the starting point guard for the squad. D. Brown often played point guard off the bench, which I don't think was the best role suited for him, honestly. I think he was better as a shooting guard. Bird's numbers in the season were 19.4 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, 7.2 assists per game, 1.8 steals per game, and 1.0 blocks per game. So he was still putting up numbers. And then also, Andrew, this is the season where Bird bounced his face off the floor against the Pacers in the first round. And he came back in that game and willed the Celtics to a big victory. He also dueled with Chuck Person for much of the series. And, while we did beat the Pacers 3-2 in the first round, we fell in the second round to the reigning world champion Detroit Pistons in 6 games. Bad back Larry was only able to muster 5 games in that series. And actually, Isaiah Thomas for the Pistons only played 4. But I want to point something out. That playoff series, I was only 7 years old. I remember sitting in front of my TV. I remember where I was. I remember our reactions to his injury. I remember our reaction to him, here comes Larry Bird, and he comes out of the tunnel and he rips off his jacket and he comes into the game. Just thinking about it, I have goosebumps right now. So it's really hard to beat that, right? As my favorite Celtics team of all time. And, as far as the Pistons go, sure, they got past the Celtics, obviously, but they lost to Jordan's Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals. They actually got swept. And Jordan averaged 29.8 points per game in that series. So, yeah, favorite team to watch for my favorite franchise, probably my favorite team of all time. I think it's got to be the 90-91 Celtics for those reasons.
Oh, a lot of nostalgia there, obviously. That introduction to the NBA, a great team, and being able to get on board with that and enjoy that run, still being contenders, as you said. And it's interesting to think what would have happened if they had gotten past the Pistons and faced the Bulls. Obviously, Larry Bird struggling with his back at that time, but a lot of talent on that team. Certainly could have been a great series, and until the Derrick Rose, Ben Gordon Bulls, the Bulls had never picked up a playoff victory over the Celtics. So interesting to think about, but obviously a great team. And those underdog teams are special, and I certainly have some favourite underdog Bulls teams as well. But those were tough years, obviously, for the Celtics in the late 90s, dropping into the lottery, but getting a couple of top players in Antoine Walker and Paul Pierce, and being able to rise again in the early 2000s. That 2002 Celtics team that made the Eastern Conference Finals against the Nets, for a while there we thought we were going to get Lakers versus Celtics in the finals, which of course we did come 2008. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I mean, the title team was special, I'm sure, but when you follow a team so passionately and you don't bandwagon and you stick with them through the tough times, it does make the championships so much more rewarding. It does make the success so much more special to be a part of. But you do really come to love those underdog teams, don't you?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I appreciated them a little bit more even than, when we got stacked. Right. When we got stacked with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen joining Paul Pierce. And then Rondo obviously was, talked about incredibly fondly across the league and was putting up some very good numbers, actually sometimes comparable to Jason Kidd and whatnot. And of course, when the big three left and Rondo was still with the Celtics, it was then Rondo's team, right? And he was a hot player in the league and, constantly in trade rumors and, what could we get for him and et cetera. So, I don't know. I appreciate the struggling years. I appreciate the years where we would walk into the playoffs maybe as a 4th seed or a 6th seed or a 7th seed, et cetera. And we were, fighting night in and night out, and you'd have underdog players step up. And when you took down, a top team, it meant more, right? Because you weren't the top team. You were the underdog and you took them down. So I appreciate the struggling seasons, and I was just a huge fan of the Celtics way before Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Rondo were there. So what about you, Andrew? What was your favorite team from your favorite franchise?
So I wish I could have a more creative answer, a more original answer here, but it is the mid to late 90s Bulls. You could pick any year, I suppose, 96, 97, or 98. I will go 1997, kind of splitting the difference between 96 and 98, obviously. 98 was special. The Last Dance was incredible. There's a reason there was a whole documentary series on it. But 1997, they were a bit stronger. They certainly were getting a bit longer in the tooth come 1998. Pippen was injured for half the year, 35 games from memory that he missed, or thereabouts, certainly the first 35 games from memory. And it was more in doubt, although that did make it special that they were on top but still kind of underdogs despite being the defending champion and having Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, obviously. But it did feel a bit more in doubt, which I appreciate now, and the drama of it, and the fact that they did come through and finish The Last Dance in style as they did. But 1997, still a bit more invincible at the time. It was so special to follow a team that felt so unbeatable. When they lost a game, you couldn't believe it. When Michael Jordan didn't score at least 20 points, and of course he was scoring in double digits right up until his Wizards comeback when he finally scored less than 10 points, in an official game anyway. There were some exhibition games, some preseason games in the 90s where he didn't score 10 because he wasn't playing as many minutes, being the preseason at all. But watching those Bulls teams and feeling that they were so invincible, that the championship was almost a formality, a foregone conclusion, that was pretty special. Feeling that, your team was going to win and having that confidence in your team, watching them just dazzle on the hardwood. Yeah, that was a very special time in the NBA. Very good time to be a Bulls fan, obviously. In fact, that is why all these years later, I would love to see the Bulls get back to that level, naturally. I was disappointed when the Derrick Rose era was cut short as it was due to his unfortunate injuries, hoping for the best for the Bulls moving forward. But the reason I am able to stay a Bulls fan to this day, Derek, despite all the ups and downs, despite some terrible front office decisions, obviously, is because that was such a special time, such an incredible time to be a Bulls fan, that second three-peat. And I wasn't watching the NBA during the first three-peat, and I've gone back and watched those games, I've watched those highlights, I appreciate them, but I actually got to experience the second three-peat live, so to speak. I was there following along with the season, watching the games, fingers crossed that they'd win, although, once again, they were winning a lot. Yeah, I would have to go with 1997. 1996 is special too, really getting into basketball at that time, solidifying my basketball fandom. 72-10, definitely their most invincible season. But 1997, I was really locked in, watching NBA action every single week, watching these highlights, watching them win games, feeling they were invincible. Yeah, I just can't go past the 97 squad.
Was there anybody that was on the second three-peat Bulls that gave you a headache? That you were like, I hate when this guy's on the floor, or when this guy's on the floor, we don't play as well. Anybody that frustrated you as a fan?
I don't think so, thinking back. I think I kind of liked the whole team. I mean, you've got Michael Jordan out there for 38, 40 minutes a game, so things were going pretty well, I suppose, for the most part. I mean, there were players that, looking back, Jason Caffey, they could have had Michael Finley. They could have had Michael Finley, and that would have set them up either to trade him for another player or picks or possibly take over. He could have been the sixth man. He went a pick later to the Suns in 1995. I don't know what they were thinking getting Jason Caffey. They already had Dickie Simpkins. If you already needed that third forward, that third power forward on the roster, you already had Simpkins there. You could have got Michael Finley instead, and that would have set you up for the future. Look, it was wrong that Jerry Krause's widow got booed during that ceremony. That wasn't cool. That was very unfortunate. But there's a reason that he's unpopular with Bulls fans. He made some tremendous blunders. Sure, he put together the championship teams, but he also, in trying to transition to the next era and set them up for success in the future, after the championship years, and avoid what happened to the Celtics, it happened. And that was kind of his fault. That was kind of his lack of foresight and lack of shrewd picks and getting talent at that low spot. And I know it's harder to get great players outside of the lottery, but again, you pass on Michael Finley, who could have been this great six-man, this great bench player who became a star for the Bulls when Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen moved on, when the championship run came to an end. And yeah, that's a huge blunder in the 95 draft.
I will say this, though. I think the Jason Caffeys, the Chris Gatlings, the Brandon Basses, etc., I think that overall they are underappreciated.
Oh, sure.
I think the guys that are intangible guys that I can throw it down every now and then, right? But they give you a little bit more, I would say, than just some end of the bench guy. Especially guys like Chris Gatling and Brandon Bass were better players than Jason Caffey. But you understand the example, right? Oh, sure. I think that those guys are overall lost when you talk about history, but they did provide valuable minutes and valuable contributions to winning teams. and whatnot. So for my favorite team to watch, not from my favorite franchise, I'm going to have to go with the Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon Rockets or the 80s Lakers. Pretty much any 80s Lakers team. But with Drexler and Olajuwon Rockets, it's like the team had everything. It had one of the greatest slashing guards in NBA history, arguably the greatest post player in NBA history, a ton of outside shooting, a versatile wing in Robert Horry, steady and exciting point guards in Kenny Smith and Sam Cassell. And the championship in 95 was special for many reasons. One, Drexler and Olajuwon were reunited, which helped Drexler get his first ring. The team finished the season 47-35 and were not expected to win the title. However, as the 6th seed, they overcame the odds and got the job done. It's also the season where David Robinson won MVP, which ignited the famous butt whooping that Olajuwon put on him in the Western Conference Finals. And not only did the Rockets beat the Magic in the finals, they swept them, cementing Olajuwon as still the top center in the league over Shaq. So, yeah, it's really tough for me to not choose that team because they had everything and they're so fun to watch. And I've gone back on YouTube actually with my brothers and watched games from that NBA Finals, and just what a beautiful brand of basketball. The team had everything. But for the 80s Lakers, it's just that up and down style. It's the teamwork, the amazing passing, the talent they had year in and year out. Obviously, I'm not old enough to, remember watching them live, but I'm on YouTube a lot, Andrew. I'm watching full games. I'm obsessed with the history of the game.
Definitely.
They are right up there with my favorite teams to watch. But yeah, that's my choice.
Couple of excellent picks there. I know that you love 80s basketball, as I do too. And like you say, it's before our time. But this is what an appreciation of NBA history gives you. You can go back and you can watch games and stars from before your time. You can see the greatness. You can see that great basketball has existed for decades, and the flashy play has existed for decades. And obviously you couldn't do some of the dribbling moves in the 80s that were allowed in the NBA after And One really got popular in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they started allowing a bit more carries and so forth. But the way that Magic has the ball on the string, the way he'll just look over at a teammate and throw that no-look pass that we all tried to do, and not as successfully as he did because he had that court vision that he could see them out of the corner of his eye, and just the way he could just swing the ball back and forth, that famous pass to Kareem, and Kareem himself, obviously, as well. And like you say, so much talent on those teams. There's a reason that the Lakers and Celtics rivalry in the 80s was so special.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say that it's the And One era that kind of loosened up the rules and allowed the carrying. I think it's the Iverson era. When he came into the league, when he came into the league, they started allowing those wide crossovers, right? They started allowing a little bit more hand under the ball. They started allowing, maybe even a few more steps, right? And whatnot. I think that the game really loosened up around that time, around 96, 97, 98. And then, of course, And One blew up, right? And then that style was in everybody's, living rooms even more. So interesting stuff, especially with the rule changes and whatnot. But the best thing about the 80s Lakers is just the ball was constantly moving, right? Touch passes all over the floor. That's the thing that's underrated. It's not just Magic Johnson doing the unselfish play, and the fancy passes. It's Byron Scott dribbling up the right side of the floor and hitting Kurt Rambis on the elbow, and Kurt Rambis does a touch pass down to Kareem, and Kareem throws it down. It was everybody on that Lakers team. And similar to the Celtics, right? The Celtics didn't run as much as the Lakers, but Bird was an amazing passer, and DJ was incredibly unselfish, and Danny Ainge was super underrated on those teams. And you had Bill Walton in 85-86, who was a tremendous passer from the big man position. And, Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale were overall unselfish. I know Kevin McHale was called the Black Hole. That was his nickname because he hardly ever passed it out of the post, but he was still a tremendous team player. But both of those teams moved the ball so well, and that's why they won so much, because they were unselfish teams and they played for each other.
Yeah, beautiful basketball in the 80s, and they weren't the only ones, but they were the ones dominating the decade.
So what about you? What was your favorite team that was not from your favorite franchise?
I might have to go with the early 2000s Timberwolves. Really enjoyed Kevin Garnett, and he became one of my favorite non-Bulls very early on in his career. And I suppose it naturally peaks with the 2004 Timberwolves, with them making the Western Conference Finals. Unfortunately, falling to the Lakers were pretty stacked that year, or certainly stacked up top, picking up Karl Malone and Gary Payton, and Sam Cassell was injured. Didn't help the Timberwolves' cause at all. Who knows what would have happened if they'd gone through to the finals. They did beat the Pistons twice during the regular season. That was a really hard-nosed, team-oriented Pistons squad, to say the least. There's a reason why they took down the favoured Lakers in the finals, but I think that would have been a pretty fun matchup, seeing Kevin Garnett in the finals with that Timberwolves team. And it was also fun to see him with Stephen Marbury for a couple of years as well in 1997 and 1998. But also the novelty, I think, seeing the Timberwolves rise for the first time. When I started watching, they were still a fairly new team, coming along in the late 80s, not even 10 years in the league when I started watching the NBA, so they hadn't found success yet. 1997 was their first time in the playoffs, and they were that lower seed, that mid-tier team for a while before breaking through in 2004. Never got past that. Kevin Garnett ends up going to Boston, winning the championship, as we noted. But yeah, some really fun Timberwolves teams. Like you say, Wally Zerbiak's there. Latrell Sprewell was there for a while. Sam Cassell, KG, just one of the best all-around players at that forward spot in the NBA. Yeah, they were a lot of fun.
Great video game team.
Yeah.
Too. Had everything. Had the post, the high post, the slashing, the shooting, steady point guard play. Cassell is an amazing mid-range shooter, right, in real life. And that translates well to games that allow you to operate in those spaces. Actually, games like 2K17, 2K16, 2K14, 13, etc. Where, they're either modded in or they're present. So yeah, no, I love that choice. My brother Nick is, Kevin Garnett is his favorite player of all time. So trust me when I say that on video games, I have played the 03-04 Timberwolves and other Garnett Timberwolves teams thousands of times because he usually uses them against me in seasons and whatnot. And then obviously as a result, we've gone back and watched tons of games from those teams on YouTube. And yeah, super exciting brand of basketball.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at NBA-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
I'd say my favorite bad team to watch is probably the Iverson Melo Nuggets. Were they bad on paper? No, absolutely not. But, they never made it out of the first round, Andrew. The Iverson Melo Nuggets lasted 2 seasons, 06-07 and 07-08. In 06-07, they missed the playoffs. In 07-08, they lost to Kobe's Lakers in the first round in a sweep, I believe. But out of those 2 seasons, 07-08 is my favorite. I remember watching them play my Celtics and getting absolutely destroyed, followed by beating them in the next meeting. And that is kind of how it went with this team. They were built on streaky offense and strong defense, but only strong defense when motivated. I prefer 07-08 over 06-07 due to the fact that Kenyon Martin wasn't hurt. So my favorite players on that team, which were Kenyon Martin, Carmelo Anthony, J.R. Smith, and Iverson, got a full season together. They went 50-32, which is pretty good, right? But were swept, like I stated, in the first round. Iverson averaged 26.4 points per game that season, leading the team. Melo averaged 25.7 points per game. J.R. Smith averaged 12.3 points per game off the bench in only 19 minutes per game. He was instant offense, but I don't think George Karl liked him very much, or his decision-making very much. Marcus Camby was second in Defensive Player of the Year voting after winning that honor in 06-07. But yeah, they're not historically looked at as a good team, right? So were they technically bad? No, they weren't bad, but they didn't go anywhere. Right.
Kind of overachievers,
and then obviously,
maybe.
Super underachievers. And then Iverson ended up getting shipped to Detroit. Billups comes over, and then they make it to the Western Conference Finals immediately. Right. So that's also incredibly notable here, because a lot of people were like, the Nuggets needed a more steady point guard. Iverson was long in the tooth. He wasn't going to be in the league that much longer, even though he was putting up great numbers, etc. So very interesting team, but I'm going to go with those Nuggets teams.
And another great video game team, which is why they've been a classic team. One of the, I say, unorthodox choices. As opposed to putting in a former champion or a perennial contender, they're one of the more unorthodox choices for classic teams in NBA 2K. But I love that. I love that 2K has actually done that and put some of those classic teams in there. And of course now we have My NBA Eras with many more historical teams, even if they're not available readily as classic teams. They're there in the My NBA Eras rosters. Yeah, no, you've talked about that team before. It's no surprise that it's one of your favorites, and understandably so. Getting the 50 wins, they're not bad, as you say, but certainly maybe overachieving a bit in the regular season, then underachieving a bit in the postseason. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. They're not a contender, they're not a perennial contender, but they're just sort of that once-off team that is interesting to watch and play with.
Exactly. So what about you?
I would have to give an honorable mention to the prompt here, the 2002 Clippers. Pretty good underdog video game team. You've got those young players in franchise mode as it was at the time in NBA Live 2002. You've got Darius Miles, Olowokandi, Lamar Odom, Elton Brand developing really well on the virtual hardwood. They had pretty good potential attributes. They could all become stars. You'd have this stacked roster. You could trade them. You could wheel and deal with that talent on that team. Yeah, the 2002 Clippers, pretty fun video game team. Pretty fun highlight, that Lamar Odom lob. That blind lob is one of the classic NBA highlights. I like to go back and watch that a lot. Also, the underdog Bulls. I mean, the baby Bulls of the mid-2000s, as they were rising, the Ben Gordon Bulls, got to the second round. Again, that's not a bad team, but it's not anywhere near the level of the championship teams, to say the least. And as weird as it is, and as conflicted as I still feel about it, Wizards Jordan. The Wizards years for Michael Jordan. It is tough to see him not in the Bulls uniform, but at the same time, he had his moments. And if he hadn't gotten injured in the 2002 season, as we've talked about many times before, Derek, what could have been? I think they would have been top four in the East, or the fifth seed, the fourth or fifth seed, that middle of the pack in the East. He was starting to pick it up and average around 30 points per game in that stretch leading up to the injury. So I do enjoy it. And as I've said before, there's also that nostalgia being my final year of high school and a changing time in your life, and that being a very memorable milestone moment, that it's all part of that, and nostalgia is often connected in that way. So yeah, I'd have to say the Jordan Wizards as well.
He came back to a really bad squad.
Yeah.
Those two teams in 01-02 and 02-03 are overall incredibly weak, and it's unfortunate that he hurt his knee, because in 01-02, and I've shown the articles for this, he was an MVP candidate before he hurt his knee up to the All-Star break, right? And he was putting up numbers that were very comparable to prime T-Mac, and they were winning a lot of games at that time. I believe they were third or fourth in the East when he hurt his knee, and he was dragging that team to that record. That team was not good. So yeah, I definitely love the Wizards Jordan years. And I feel like more people, especially the younger crowd, need to actually watch Jordan, during that time, because he was putting up some pretty great numbers before that knee injury and was moving, in my opinion, my brothers and I have talked about it, very similar to the 97-98 Michael Jordan, as far as his quick moves, as far as what he was doing down low, his jump shooting, etc. It was really impressive stuff.
Funnily enough, I recently played a game of NBA Live 96 with Wizards Jordan, my first time putting Michael Jordan in Washington in NBA Live 96. Of all the rosters I've made for that game, work in progress 2002 roster based on my 2001 roster that I released all those years ago. Sent you a couple of highlights from that, and that also has a great jersey update that Bobby H, back in the day, shout out to Bobby wherever you are, made a Wizards logo update and a Wizards wordmark update and Wizards logo update and other team logo and wordmark and jersey updates as well to get 96 more up to date than it ever had been before. But yeah, played a couple of games with Wizards Jordan, sent you a couple of clips. That was novel to do that with Live 96 for the first time.
Those jerseys looked great.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Yeah, Yeah, he did an excellent job. I think that it's really cool that people are still modding that game. And you and I recently were working on portraits for it, as in like over the last few years. And yeah, the game is still super moddable. The action is fun at times in the virtual hardwood as well. So, Andrew, let's get to the community responses. We did have quite a few, and we'll start with Twitter. T Gentry at Bucky T states, the Jordan and Derrick Rose era Bulls. So he's a Bulls fan. Andrew, that's his franchise. So you and him have that in common. His favorite team from not his favorite franchise, the Golden State Warriors, the We Believe team with Baron Davis, Monta Ellis, Biedrins, and Steven Jackson. That team is a super fun video game team, and they also have Al Harrington and whatnot. That's one of my favorite teams to put on the floor, like the 06-07 Golden State Warriors. And then he states, I enjoyed watching the 06-07 New Orleans OKC Hornets with a young CP3, Peja, Tyson Chandler, and David West. And again, another fun video game team. You have Slashing, I believe that they had like Morris Peterson around that time, and you have CP3 and then Peja to stretch the floor. And obviously Tyson Chandler is way better in video games offensively than he was at that time, catching lobs and, being a drop step guy, etc. And then David West, who was always that solid power forward who could drop 20 and 10 on any given night. So yeah, some good choices there.
Oh, I definitely love those choices. And I said the Champion Bulls were my favorite team from my favorite franchise. The Derrick Rose era, short as it was, as disappointing as the end was, certainly up there as well. I think all longtime Bulls fans appreciated that rise back to prominence and didn't really expect that much coming into the 2011 season. Yes, they had Carlos Boozer. Yes, they'd got Kyle Korver, had shored up the team a little bit, but to become the top seed, to get the best record in the league, to make it through the Eastern Conference Finals, yeah, I just wish they had more shooting on that team. They might have actually been able to take down the Miami Heat. They did win that first game and unfortunately lost the next four, but it was still special. It was still special to see them come back and gave us hope, Derek. Gave us hope for at least another year until that knee injury. The We Believe Warriors, great video game team. We need to play with them. I think we need to connect on 2K7 or a game and not Live 07 and play with them. Definitely a fun team. And they kind of wrecked the playoffs, knocking the Mavericks out as they did, but it was exciting at the time. And yeah, those Hornets, obviously an underdog, not a great team, but definitely some talent there. And I love playing with the Valentine's Day jersey, as you know, Derek. Such a rare jersey, and I love that it's in a couple of games, including Live 10.
Andrew loves his alternate jerseys.
I do, yeah.
I've learned that.
They used to be great.
You absolutely love them.
They used to be great.
Yeah.
They kind of suck now.
Garva at Garva_23 states, Jordan's Bulls were his favorite. 90s Knicks were fire for their competitive nature. So that's his favorite team from not his favorite franchise, and his favorite bad team, to go along with what you said, the 2001 to 2003 Wizards, mostly because of MJ. Stasho Bro at Nate Stasho states his favorite team from his favorite franchise is the Cavs, and he doesn't list a year, so just the Cavs. And his favorite team from not his favorite franchise is the Sacramento Kings. And I know that, more than likely he enjoyed the Chris Webber, Mike Bibby, Doug Christie, Peja Stojakovic Kings, and or the Jason Williams version, because they love NBA Live 2001.
Not the Kenny
Andrew,
Thomas.
And I'm sure that team
not the Kenny Thomas Kings. Floor.
Hey, Kenny Thomas, I mentioned guys like Chris Gatling and Brandon Bass. I actually, I think Kenny Thomas was another guy that's kind of underappreciated.
Sure.
For what he
As
brought.
your top player, though? As your top forward?
That's a bad team if Kenny Thomas is your best, right? And then his favorite bad team, as he just states, the Vancouver Grizzlies, but I'm sure that he definitely has love for Big Country.
Oh, I love those jerseys. And I love to see whenever they're in games. There's been a few games that have had that, the final Vancouver Grizzlies jersey, but the original ones, people can say they were gaudy or, of their time. I love them. I love them. And the original Cartoon Raptors jersey as well. They stood out. They stood out a lot better than some of the City jerseys these days. I'm just going to put it out there. Kings, 2002 Kings. I played the franchise with them in NBA Live 2002. Love that team. Very exciting to play with. Very exciting to watch. Always going to be controversial because of the 2002 Western Conference Finals, although you go back and you read the oral history of that series, and the Kings players themselves do mention, we missed free throws, we made mistakes, we still could have won that series even with the questionable officiating. My old coach told me, Derek, It was a tough pill to swallow as a teenager, as a young man, frustrated with some of the officiating in our local league. My coach Steve said, you can't rely on good officiating to win games. You don't want bad calls. It sucks when bad calls seem to decide a game or a series, but you still need to execute. You still need to hit your free throws. You still need to take care of the ball. Don't make turnovers. Don't commit silly fouls. You still need to get the job done. You don't want to rely on the right call being made in crunch time to win games. You need to take care of business before that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Before I move on to the next response, do you think that anybody out there that's a Grizzlies fan has Greg Anthony as their favorite Grizzly of all time?
I hope somebody does have a Greg Anthony jersey. What about Blue Edwards?
I mean, the jerseys were great.
Yeah.
Right? Or Benoit Benjamin. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Benoit Benjamin was on that Grizzlies team too. What an interesting group. It makes me think of those Grizzlies and Raptors teams, how many interesting players they had, like the Raptors having Ed Pinckney there as a key guy, and then, Alvin Robertson and whatnot. Super interesting teams related to that expansion draft. Mike P for 3 at Mike Pritchard. He states, as a Knicks fan, I will always love the way Tibbs runs our starters into the ground, but jokes aside, the team I actually like to watch is the Pelicans. It's also the team I am thinking of starting my league with on 2K25. I don't know, the Pelicans, Zion Williamson is a huge draw, and he's really fun to use in video games, Andrew, because of his bully ball, right? And, the power dunks and, the way he can swat shots and whatnot. But that team became a little less interesting for me because, Brandon Ingram's gone now, right? He's with the Raptors, and I feel like he was an important piece for that team in video games. So I'm not as fond as that Pelicans team anymore. And then he states, team I loved watching back in the day was the Cavs with Ricky Davis, and if you go back far enough, you got Ricky Davis with Darius Miles and Big Z and whatnot, and so that's definitely an interesting and at times fun video game team. And in fact, LeBron is also with them for a stint in video games. I believe in NBA Live 2004's default rosters.
Absolutely.
So that's a team I've used, and they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, Ricky Davis seems to show up on some of those video game teams, doesn't he? Some of those underdog bad teams that are still fun to play with in video games.
He does. He's on the Celtics as well in a couple games.
Oh, we played with him, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he's definitely fun in video games. Better in video games than he was in real life. Him at Shrek 2 Fanboy states, any Darren, Boozer, Okur, Karolenko era Jazz for his favorite team from his favorite franchise. For his favorite team from not his favorite franchise, it's Nash era Suns. Might specify the 05 team, though, for any other team. And I think that's a good choice. That's the Joe Johnson, Steve Nash, Sean Marion, Amari Stoudemire Suns. And actually, if you're going 04, 05, Walter McCarty, video game legend, is also on that team. But then if you go a little bit later, you still have some fun Suns teams. Like if you look at that 09-10 Suns team, you have Steve Nash, Jason Richardson, Grant Hill, right? Amare Stoudemire. And then you also have a Shaq Suns team with some of those key pieces as well. So a lot of fun Suns teams in the mid-late 2000s. And then he states, for the bad team, it's so hard to answer, but I'd probably say either the 06-07 Celtics or this year's Jazz, actually. And the 06-07 Celtics is the team that we actually threw on the floor on NBA 2K7, and we had a good time.
Ricky Davis, once again, yeah. And those Nash era Suns, the 7 seconds or less Suns, absolutely a great video game team, but also a perennial contender as well. 2005, that OG squad does stand out because you do have Joe Johnson. As you said, you've got a healthy Amare Stoudemire, although he did come back strong in 2007 after missing most of 2006. Yeah, very popular team. I would have to say that's one of my favorites as well.
So moving over to Discord, Careless XCI states, favorite team to watch for my favorite franchise. The Mavs is or used to be my favorite franchise. I'm guessing the Doncic trade rubbed him the wrong way. So the 2011 team would be the obvious pick. He states, I will mention, though, that the 13-14 team, the Monta Dirk combo was really fun. Those two together with cool vets such as Jose Calderon, Matrix, Sean Marion, Vince Carter, etc. It was also the last 20 points per game season from Dirk, and he almost managed a 50-40-90 season too, despite being barely able to move anymore. Favorite team to watch, not from my favorite franchise, he states, I would say the 2009 and 2010 Lakers teams. That was peak basketball to me. And my brother and I actually went back and watched some full games from the Celtics-Lakers finals, actually, in 07-08. So a similar Lakers team and whatnot. And yeah, basketball was still so awesome at that time, Andrew, and you and I were huge fans still of the NBA. And then he states favorite bad team to watch. He states those were not really bad, but since they had losing records, I would go with both MJ's Wizards teams. I've also enjoyed watching Legends on their last legs, and MJ, of course, was the legend.
Yeah, once again, can totally relate to those picks there. I also think of a team like the early Steve Francis Rockets. Steve Francis and Hakeem Olajuwon together for a couple of years there. That's fun in games and had their moments in real life as well.
Yeah, exactly. I throw that team on the floor quite often. However, I will say that I prefer the Steve Francis, Yao Ming, Coutinho Mobley team. For some reason, that one, plays a little bit better on the floor. You have young Yao Ming there. They were surrounded with shooters. They have Maurice Taylor, who I think was super underrated when he was healthy, and he's a really fun player to use in video games. So I actually prefer the Ming Francis combo in Houston. Juicy Shack Meat states, favorite Pistons team to watch was from 15-16, where they took part in a competitive playoff sweep against the eventual champion Cavaliers. The underdog vibe of the team resembled the 2004 championship squad for me. Favorite non-Pistons team for me was the 18-19 Raptors, also underdogs that won it all with a well-rounded team on defense and hot offensive firepower. He states Lady Luck was also on their side, game winner versus the 76ers in the second round. Then he says favorite bad team was the 23-24 Detroit Pistons. Yes, those guys had the worst NBA losing streak in history, worst record in franchise history, and made me cry out, dear God, why? But I couldn't help but believe in the talents and potential, thus can't completely look away as I could still see flashes of brilliance. Their current success definitely helped mitigate the pain I felt experiencing the previous year. Yeah, they did have a great turnaround this year, but going back to that Raptors team in 18-19, just what a fluke. What a random season.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard's one season in Toronto and everything comes together. The shot on Embiid, that bounced off the side of the rim and somehow fell and, propelled them, to the next round and whatnot. That Raptors championship, still just unbelievable.
It was wild. And to have that team win their first championship out of nowhere, yeah, that was really cool. And look, it goes without saying that I want the Bulls to win. If I had to pick a team to win the championship any given year, it's going to be my favorite team. But in lieu of that, I want to see a veteran get their ring, or I want to see an underdog get through, or a team finally break through and win a championship. And that was a really special scenario. Like you say, it was really weird, but it was cool at the same time. And to do it against the Warriors, I know they were fatigued after 5 straight trips to the finals, and Klay Thompson goes down with an injury, and Kevin Durant goes down with an injury, so you can put all the asterisks you want on that win. But I don't really believe in the asterisk theory. I think you can apply that to pretty much any championship, really. You can say that some are tougher than others and point out some of these factors, but at the end of the day, you've got to get the job done, and they did with Kawhi, and it's a shame that Kawhi and the Clippers ran into the Nuggets in the first round this year. Pretty good first year in their new home. And yeah, Juicy Shack Meat is a huge Pistons fan, as we know, and that 2024 team, that was a tough team to follow, I'm sure, but goes back to what you said about some of your favorite Celtics teams, that when you do love your team and you support them unconditionally like that you still stick by them. You still take some joy in the flashes of brilliance and the signs that they could be better in the future and the few wins that you do get.
Yeah, I'm sure he enjoyed the fight. I'm sure he enjoyed those, flashes of potential and whatnot, and it gave him something to look forward to. And every single win and every game that they were close in, I'm sure he was on the edge of his seat. So yeah, I'm similar. I agree. Thundershack, who posed this community question, states favorite team to watch was the 09-10 Suns. Might be obvious from clips I post here. Missed the playoffs the year before with Shaq, and then traded him for scraps in the offseason. The team was completely counted out in preseason predictions and then went on to win 54 games and make the Western Conference Finals, while also getting revenge on the Spurs in the process, led by my favorite point guard and power forward and a really strong bench. There's some great names on that team. Fun in 2K also. He also states my favorite non-Suns team might have been the 2023 Nuggets. Jokic might make for a funny Discord profile picture, but he's also super fun to watch. They've retained much of that core to this day, and when they are on, it's a really exciting team. Honorable mention to the early breakout Warriors, 13 through 16. People think threes because of Curry and Clay, but they had a really creative offense around cuts and lobs too. And when he says that, I always think of the schemes that they used to run, like the elevator doors. I know that was to get a 3-point shot, but they were running a lot of great plays, for cutters, for threes, for backdoor lobs, etc. So I definitely agree with him there. He also states, I've enjoyed them far less in recent years because I've grown tired of Draymond's antics, and I couldn't agree more there. He drives me nuts. He is one of my most disliked players in the league, and the drama that he creates is so unnecessary, and I think he's a terrible example on the basketball court. So favorite bad team is actually kind of tough because I think of underwhelming teams that are fun in 2K but miserable in real life. Example, the 13 Lakers. I would say maybe the pre-playoff 2013 Trailblazers, rookie Lillard, Wes Matthews, Batum, LaMarcus Aldridge, and J.J. Hickson. Their starters were pretty competitive, but their bench was atrocious. They made a couple of moves the next year and were in the playoffs, but you saw flashes of fun that first year. Also, maybe the 2020 Suns for 8 games in the bubble. Yeah, I actually enjoy putting those young Trailblazers on the floor, the Lillard, Wes Matthews, Batum, Aldridge, and whatnot, those teams. And he also brings up that 13 Lakers team that was just an incredible underperformer. And the Dwight Howard, Steve Nash, Kobe Lakers squad. And again, fun video game team, but in real life, I believe that year they lost every single preseason game. And there were a bunch of experts saying, "Oh, well, this doesn't mean anything, right? It's the preseason."
Yeah,
but
it's only
if you lose
season.
if you lose every single preseason game, that could still mean that there's an issue with chemistry.
Yeah,
right.
With that much talent,
that maybe the pieces
wrong.
don't fit. Right, exactly. And Artest was also on that squad. But yeah, I like his choices
for sure. And yeah, that Lakers team, very funny games, but not a good fit, as you said. And yeah, when you keep making excuses throughout the year, oh, it's only the preseason. Oh, it's still early. Oh, it's only the All-Star break. There's still half a season to go. They can finish strong. Oh, it's only the first round. Whatever. Yeah, it gets to a certain point where the excuses don't fly anymore. And Draymond Green is also one of my least favorite players. I like physicality, as you know, Derek, but he goes way beyond physicality with the swinging out, the lashing out on fouls, swinging the elbow, and acting like a victim. I'll give the Detroit Pistons this. I'll give the bad boy Pistons this. They knew who they were. They made no bones about it. They were who they were. Draymond acting like a victim. Stan Van Gundy being a stand for him, quite frankly. The media not calling him out. Him being a part of the media. Him having a podcast and everything. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know he's had a successful career. Hats off to him for sticking around as long as he has, for making all that money for his success. But yeah, I do not like Draymond Green.
But I don't think he's a tough player or a hard-nosed player either. I just think he's a dirty player.
Oh, agreed.
Right,
yeah.
There's a difference. Yeah, and I think that his antics on the court don't help his team. I think that they're a terrible example for the fans. I think that they're completely unnecessary. And I think he hurts his team more than he helps them. And a light doesn't get shined on that enough. And I've said it before, my brothers and I have talked about this as well. If you make Draymond Green your best player on a team, you are a lottery team. You are absolutely terrible. And, you take away Steph and, the players that he's had surrounding him over the years. And, you make Draymond Green a number 2 best player, a number 2 option, or a number 1 option on a team. You're a lottery team. You're not a great team. I think he's the beneficiary of playing with Steph Curry and some great Warriors teams. And it's unfortunate to me that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer because I absolutely can't stand him.
Oh, absolutely agreed. And on a related note, I just finished Year 6 in my NBA 2K14 My Career. That was a lot of fun, once again. But funnily enough, Draymond Green is actually out of the league. He was out of the league circa 2016. He doesn't have great ratings in the default roster of 2K14, so he kind of washed out of the league. Kind of a funny alternate reality, especially since I just faced the Warriors in the 2019 NBA Finals.
Yeah, I wish he had washed out of the league in real life. That would have been excellent because I can't stand him. But yeah, I believe we also had responses on Facebook.
We do indeed. First up, Alejandro says the 2004-2005 Phoenix Suns. And yeah, very popular choice once again. JV says the 2008 Celtics were his favourite, the 1983 76ers, and the 2002 Bulls as that bad team. And I'm thinking back to the 2002 Bulls. You had rookie Tyson Chandler, rookie Eddie Curry, not a lot else. Well, Jamal Crawford was there, of course, Marcus Fizer. But yeah, I can see it. I do appreciate them in hindsight for some of the interesting lineups they had, and Jalen Rose was there briefly as well. But yeah, the 2008 Celtics, champions, of course. And I was going to say, interesting, a Celtics fan appreciating the 76ers, but you being a Dr. J fan, I think you appreciate them as well.
Oh, I love the Dr. J Sixers. But obviously, as you know, I was a big Daryl Dawkins fan. I never got to watch him live, but he's one of my favorite players to go back and watch. Just the way he threw it down. I actually thought he had a sweet looking mid-range jumper, etc. He set some hard picks. He was physical. He had some pretty nice plays and blocking shots as well. So yeah, Dawkins when he was on the Sixers. And then also Allen Iverson is one of my favorite players of all time. So I love the Iverson Sixers teams and whatnot. So yeah, I can still be fans of the rivals, right? Yeah, the Sixers were a Celtics rival, and I love the '80s Lakers, the way they played basketball, and that was the biggest rival of the Celtics and basketball history. And I like some of the Kobe Lakers teams, etc. So yeah, I'm not like that. I just like watching good basketball and good players, right? So yeah, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, rivalries can be fun, but some people certainly do take them a bit too far where you can't appreciate the talent and respect them as an opponent. And there's some Knicks teams that I like. Even as a Bulls fan, there are some Knicks teams that I do enjoy. And finally, we have Chad. Some very interesting picks here for his favourite team from his favourite franchise, the 1957-58 Atlanta Hawks. Then, of course, the St. Louis Hawks, the 95-96 Chicago Bulls as favourite team from not his favourite franchise, and favourite bad team is the 2004-2005 Atlanta Hawks. So another history buff here, Derek, and I love to see that.
I mean, I wish that those who commented on basketball were forced into history lessons before they were allowed to comment, right? Because think about all the dumb takes that you see on social media. And it's not just the young people either. It's sometimes people our age. Sometimes people 10 years younger than us, 15 years younger than us and whatnot. But just the dumb takes, the disrespect, the dumb comparisons, the dumb debates, all of that stuff. It just drives me nuts.
And, once again, shout out to Dime Dropper on X, Clippers fan and content creator. He is an advocate for decades before his time. He loves NBA history, and I love his takes.
Yeah, and he was the host for Locked On Clippers, and because he was real and because he was honest and whatnot, he actually, got opportunities, and he also, gained quite the following, and I appreciate that, and I think that tells you something, right? Because you don't always have to go with the flow, and right now the flow with the media and whatnot is to bash prior decades of hoop, batch the prior teams, the players, whatnot, throw out these wild comparisons and everything. And, Dime Dropper, he stood his ground and, stood up for the past and was realistic about his takes and became a student of the game. And he gained a following. And like I stated, he got opportunities. He's the host of Locked On Clippers and whatnot. So, yeah, good stuff there.
Yeah, well deserved. And I've said it to him on X that I admire anyone who sticks with a bad team or sticks with a team that does come up short, as the Clippers obviously have for many years. They're no longer the joke they were when we got into basketball, Derek. They were that perennial joke outside of a couple of playoff appearances. The Clippers are the bad team of the league year after year, and they have been more successful in recent years, still trying to get over that hump, obviously. But I appreciate anybody sticking with a team because, like I said, it's easy for me to stick with the Bulls all these years later. Easier, perhaps, because I do have those fond memories to fall back on. It was an incredible run, that second three-peat. Like I said, feeling that your favorite team can't lose, that of course they're going to win the championship. They got Michael Jordan. They're the Bulls. They're going to three-peat. It's obvious. That's my inner fanboy, my 14-year-old inner fanboy talking, Derek. But that is how it felt, and that is how it turned out. But that has softened the blow of some very tough years since. I have those fond memories to fall back on. Even if the Bulls never win a championship again, I got to experience that. And that's why it was so cool when friends like Kenny of the NLSC and Sean, who I met at the NBA Live community events, who are Nuggets fans, when they finally got to see the Nuggets win a championship. And I like watching that Nuggets team as well. Jokic is awesome. So I admire fans who have followed teams that weren't perennial contenders and have had some really tough years, and they've stuck with them. They haven't hopped off the bandwagon, jumped on the bandwagon of another team, and when it pays off, it's got to be so much more rewarding. So, shout out to Don Dropper and anyone else who follows a team that hasn't been a perennial contender or multi-time champion.
So yeah, Andrew, that's it for the responses. The community got into this one, and I really appreciate Thundershack putting forth these questions because, I think they're fun topics, and I love when the community gets involved with the show, right? So keep it coming.
Absolutely. And we have been focusing on the real NBA here because we are real basketball fans at the end of the day, but to the point that we made a couple of times during the show, Derek, these are so often great video game teams. So we're going to have to play with some of them when we connect in our future sessions and come back to the topic of video game teams.
Absolutely. We could do another show around the best video game teams and, which video games they're the best to use it and whatnot. Also, Live 01 Legends, we got to get you back on the show at some point. I've been watching some of your footage. You guys are still so into NBA Live 2001 and NBA Live 2005, etc. So it'd be cool to have some more guests on the show and bring back the Live 01 Legends as well.
We'll definitely have to try and tee that up. And just as a teaser for that potential video game team show, the 2006 76ers. That's a favorite of ours.
Yeah, that's Iguodala, Chris Webber, Kyle Korver, Allen Iverson, Lou Williams on the bench, Matt Barnes, Dallenberg, etc. Yeah, definitely a fun video game team.
Jamal Mashburn, yeah, just there on the injured roster.
Doesn't really count, but yeah, we'll use him if he's there.
Yeah, it's like Hakeem on the 2003 Raptors. We'll use him. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us. And of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D for3G and at D for384. I'm also on YouTube, D for3, and on the NLSC, D for3.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.